Aloha. I can't do that without laughing. If you are a human being living on this planet, these messages are irrelevant for you. There is a stand-up comedian, although sometimes he sits down and says, I don't care who you are, that's funny. That's funny right there. So, I don't care who you are, these messages in some way are for you. I received a few questions on my previous video about children, and I'm going to relate and connect both the external physical children and the internal child, which every human being has inside, the inner child, often known or called the emotional center, the heart chakra. The question I received, I'm going to broaden the response a bit, but essentially the question is, yes, I see the value and I want my children to have space to be themselves and to be in the moment and to let them be children. However, there are times when I want to simply enjoy a meal in quiet. And I think this is a fair question, a very fair question. The first guidance that is coming through is be attentive. If you're enjoying a meal and let's say there is a child that comes up to you, or let's say there's noise in the background, it is okay to go up to the child, or if the child comes up to you, to first acknowledge and attend to, this is somebody pulling on your shoulder or tapping your knee or trying to get your attention. Acknowledge that this is a human being. Even though you maybe have just gotten home from work and you just want a moment of silence, do your best. And of course, we are all human beings. No human being is perfect, so we may react. It is a natural part of being on this journey, on this planet. We may react out of impulse, and we may have emotions of frustration that get expressed through us. But as quickly as we can realize it, as I remind myself in these videos, especially to take a breath. Experience how grounding it is to just bring attention to the inside the body where the breath can be observed. Acknowledge that child. Everyone else really can wait for the most part, but for that child, it has an instinctive desire to be acknowledged, to be attended to. One suggestion is to ask this child, after acknowledging it, if it is okay for you to finish eating first, and then you'd be happy to go and play with them. This is much more effective and much more nurturing to the child than trying to ignore it or push it away. And to connect this back to our inner child. That inner child, for most of us, is a voice inside, and not a voice as in hello, like an external voice, but a voice that comes through feeling, through thought. But through being ignored and not acknowledged, it has become so faint and distant in our consciousness. It's a voice that may say quietly, I don't like the way that feels, when someone may ignore a message from us or ignore us in real time, although we see that a lot less in the human world. It's very easy for someone to ignore a phone call, ignore a message, ignore an email, But this inner child is in the same way as your physical child. And maybe you don't have physical children, maybe you don't see them, or they're not a part of your life right now. Wonderful. There's still this inner part. Is asking, begging for your attention, begging just to be listened to, begging to be heard, begging to be acknowledged. Just to let you guys know, sometimes when I breathe and I'm not talking, I'm just opening up my consciousness a bit more to angels to see if they have any messages they want to chime in or share, as I like this to be a joint effort between us. And it's also an invitation for you to bring attention inside your body toward your breath and slow down with me. I would love this. This inner child that speaks to us towards our feelings, to our thoughts. Nurture this at the same time. Or if you don't have any children at this time, or you don't see them, you can just focus on this. Allow a little bit of space, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, to pose the question to your heart. And if you have children, why not the same question? Is there anything you want me to know? Is there anything I need to know? And then just listen or journal. Because when we journal without filtering, and the intention is just to write down whatever comes, however absurd or silly or foolish it may seem through our judgmental mind, write it down. You may be surprised, as I am so often, by what seemingly comes through when I just journal. Another suggestion that I am hearing literally is relate to the children. Just put yourself in their shoes. They don't know, for example, if they're playing and they're being what you may call loud, and maybe what the culture you're living in also calls loud. They don't know loud. They don't know not loud. They just know natural. And as you have expressed, many of you, you want to allow for that. You don't want to suppress that. You don't want to squash that. But how can I also experience peace, you ask? Teach them consideration for others' feelings. Teach them this consciousness of compassion and kindness through perhaps a simple exercise. Have them sit and try to eat a meal, and you, as the parents, go and play loudly, making a lot of noise, and maybe we can be a little bit dramatic with it. See if they're able to eat as peacefully. See if they enjoy the noise that you're experiencing. Show them what it is you're experiencing, because your children, they love you. Sometimes I've expressed to kids when working with them that when they are being a certain way, or when they're expressing in a certain way, my head hurts, or I feel pain, or something like this in the body. Immediately they understand. They don't want to hurt us. This is where the role of a parent is very useful and helpful for them. Another example that a friend was sharing with me, as I felt to be open, wide open myself to guidance that might come from all aspects of the universe. And one friend, she suggested, planted a seed for this, which I'm now going to expand a little bit upon, which is have them be on a phone call just to illustrate the importance and the value of quiet for certain periods of time. Have them be on a phone call and let it be with someone, maybe a family member that knows beforehand the intention of this call, and you talk very loudly and sort of mimic their behavior when you're trying to eat a peaceful meal or when you're on the phone. And this relates to any sort of behavior that you see as it has a time and a place for, but not all the time. They may not know what is an inside voice or an outside voice. Teach them, show them kindly, compassionately, patiently. I mention patient because it is in the DNA of a human being to be imperfect. Unless you call perfect, unless under your definition of perfect is imperfection. But I'm not going to get into that too far right now. Human beings will, there is some sense of egoic identity. Whoever you are. And lastly, just to bring it right back around to continuing to be open to children as if they are themselves Jesus Christ or Prophet Muhammad or Hazrat Imam or the Buddha called Siddhartha in his life, or Bob Marley or Gandhi or any of these beings. Ask them questions not just about for some intellectual curiosity, but ask them this question that you have posed to me. Say, ask, if you were trying to have a quiet meal and you were feeling disturbed, what would you say to the people that were making the noise that was maybe interfering with you having a quiet, peaceful meal? As a final few messages, how does this relate back to the inner child? You're validating it, you're showing it that it matters, that it's important, where for every single child, again, I don't care who you are, every single child has felt abandoned and has had his needs not met at some point, perhaps more so than others during its childhood. Now you get the opportunity, the beautiful opportunity, to give it the love that only you can give it, to give it the nourishment, the water, the food, the time that only you can give it. Until then, it will be reflected in relationships externally, and the patterns will keep repeating until eventually something guides you to look internally. I mentioned last time, the last message, the last video, they love languages. Now, I'm sure that all of you looked them up, but for the one person or two that didn't, love languages that you can give yourself and your children. All of them. Quality time, words of affirmation, the receiving of gifts, giving them gifts. And in fact, I'm going to add to this giving, allow them to give and to receive. Because there's a beautiful healing and joy and magic in both giving and receiving of gifts. Physical touch. There's another one that's not mentioned in these listed 5 love languages, and that is sharing conscious presence. This is just as important, if not more important, than any of those, though it is a bit hard to say which is more or less important. But sharing conscious presence with your inner child, just to sit and be with it, to allow space for its feelings. Allow it to express whatever it wants. Allow this with your children, allow this with yourself. I'm intending for these videos to be a little bit shorter, but this is how it unfolded. And I'm practicing just sharing spontaneously without doing a take or cutting it and editing it. So another thing I'm being reminded of now is that the human being attention span is not long. And also children attention span is not long. And I like the way that it's coming through, as in not long. Aloha, namaste, I love you, mwah, infinite times. Grazie. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Gracias.